So my first love is Rear Window from 1954, directed, of course, by Alfred Hitchcock, starring Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly, Thelma Ritter. Quick logline: a house and wheelchair-bound photographer, his fashion model girlfriend, and his visiting nurse spy on neighbors from his courtyard window. Despite skepticism by his private eye detective friend, they're convinced one of his neighbors is the murderer. So I think this is probably the first movie that I could think of that I watched of his kind of from start to finish. And you're instantly sort of raptured and captured in just like the conceit of the movie. Because it's such a clever conceit, everybody can relate to that in some form or the other. That you're in your home and you're, depending on who you are and how you see the world, your level of curiosity in terms of what is happening with your neighbors might vary, but everybody has a little bit of that,
Hmm.
and this is sort of dialed up to the highest degree, especially in this kind of a setup where the set that they built up, where you literally can see every window in front of you across different floors. And then once again, the premise is so clever because the lead character in Jimmy Stewart has had an accident of some sort. So he's homebound, he's wheelchair bound. So he's
Hmm.
there and there's nothing else to do. And I think we all felt this even more so in the pandemic era where we were all stuck up and
Right.
and this is the life we were living vicariously through other people. And on the surface, there's fun in that. And as I said earlier, there's like a titillating quality to that, oh, what are you going to see? Are you going to have an in on people's fights and romances and, somebody taking their clothes off or what have you, right? Like there's all of that varies. But then you end up sort of noticing or discovering something that's darker, and what does that do to your mind? And I think that's what this movie is about, really, is that how much of that dark thing that you're seeing is really true, or is this something that's in your head that's coming out? And it plays with that in that dimension. But then it's Hitchcock, right? So it's not just going to be about that. There's so many layers to the movie that in the girlfriend character, like the more I watch this movie, I feel like this movie is actually Grace Kelly's movie, because
Mm.
she's the one who goes through a transformation where she's trying to, catch Jimmy Stewart's attention. First of all, I'm like, look at Grace Kelly. I mean, how could you not? I mean, she's just is incredible in this movie.
Yeah, I think this just I think of screen performances from a female in film history. I feel like this might be the hottest anyone's ever looked at a movie, at least in the top two for me. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just absolutely stunning.
I
Which
would
is part of the
agree.
joke, I think, that he literally
It's part of the
doesn't care
joke.
about her when she's like the most perfect woman that has ever been placed in front of a
It's
of a
like,
of a man.
yeah, it's like 100 on a scale of a 10 or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, and he
It's
still is like,
just,
but you're annoying. Get out of
yeah.
here.
But then something really fun happens where she leaps out and becomes the part of the whole action that everyone is witnessing, including Jimmy Stewart, and everything changes. And this is once again like it's so meta in that way that first of all you're eavesdropping, second of all you want to help, but do you really want to help, or are you just in for the fun ride to really dip your toes into the action, like what is really happening over here? So like I said in the beginning, like this is a fun ride that you can just sit in your own living room and watch this movie, or you can play with the deep psychology of, once again, what we desire, how we see ourselves and how we see each other. And the last thing I would say is just like relationship between men and women, which again is at play in most of Hitchcock's movies. And this is another perfect example of that, like the push pull between the two of them that continues throughout the movie. So yeah, this is one of his masterpieces, I think, and once again a gift that just keeps giving on every rewatch. What is your relationship with Rear Window?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said. I mean, this is a masterpiece, and we have a masterpiece category in this, obviously in our format. But there's like probably literally like five or six 10 out of 10
Exactly.
movies that he's made. This is I definitely agree as one of them. Yeah, I this is a movie that I saw early on in my sort of exploration of his filmography. Like I saw this before I took the Hitchcock class. Like it was such an easy kind of log line or high concept as a kid. You're like, oh, a guy's looking across and sees like a murder, and what does he do? So like as a young teenager, like this appealed to me and I watched it and loved it back then. But the more and more I see it, the more and more I can appreciate the movie. Before I get into sort of what I think kind of the thesis of the movie is, I definitely can relate to Jimmy Stewart's desire, and maybe this is something that Hitchcock's trying to say about humans, right? The desire to be like that voyeur and to look, and
Mm-hmm.
like how much do you want to get involved? And when I was a freshman in college, my dorm looked onto another dormitory that was all just windows on the other side. Actually, they weren't. It was just the entire side of that dorm. Each apartment was just like a glass panel. So at night or whatever, I'd be doing homework and I could just look over to the left and look at what everyone was doing and see what was going on. And I kind of got to know, not know them, but kind of learn who these people were over the course of the year. And I remember one night it was late and I was working and I look over and I see there, no one's there. It's all dark. And there's like a candlelight in the room. And I was like, oh, that's like not good. Like it's kind of dangerous. And then 5 minutes later, I look over and it's brighter. I'm like, that's weird. And then the wall was on fire. And and I didn't do anything because I was so involved in watching what was happening. I felt like a
Mm.
voyeur and I watched the fire grow. I watched the looked in the rest of the building to see if anyone else is in there. There's only a couple students like in their rooms doing homework and stuff. Because then it's like I think it was like 1:30 or whatever. I had a paper I was trying to work on. So I watched the fire alarms go on. I watched the firemen kind of get there, run through the hallways, go into the room. And I was so stuck in this, like, I'm just the watcher. I can't call 911, even though, yes, I definitely should have. This is bad. Like, I immediately should have called the fire department because I saw the fire start. But I felt like separated from this because I was so used to like I'm just watching a movie. These aren't real people and real lives going on. It's just for my entertainment. I was used to that for so many months that I felt like I couldn't act, which is sort of, I think, a lot of what Jimmy Stewart struggles with in this
Uh-huh.
movie too. Like, I mean, yeah, he's wheelchair bound. How much do I want to get involved in this, and how much do I feel connected to these lives, or am I putting myself at a distance because I'm feeling like I'm just watching, these lives as little plays or little
Yeah.
television shows, each individual one. So I definitely lived through something where I every
That's
time I see this
amazing.
movie, I think back to that fire that I definitely should have called 911.
Now,
100%. Like no one got hurt or anything,
no one got
luckily.
hurt, at least. Yeah.
And if I was seeing like a murder like in this movie, hopefully I would have actually done something and not just been
Well, or
so, I
you're
don't know.
not the Grace Kelly of this story,
You're
you
right.
know?
You're
You
right. I'm not.
didn't want to jump in. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's that.
Yeah. Yeah. But in terms of the film, I kind of view this as Hitchcock's, or maybe one of his, but I think it's him, it's a seminal comment on like movie making. Who is he as an artist? And first of all, Stewart's in a chair looking through a lens. So sort of like the Hitchcock, the director role. And there's everyday lives going on in all these apartments. And they're normal stuff. Like the one woman's working out. There's a woman who, can't get a date, the musician, the young couple, and it's just boring life, just normal, everyday, boring stuff. But Hitchcock inserts something like a murder, something exciting, because everyday life is boring. And why would anyone people wouldn't want to watch that. They want something exciting. So Jimmy Stewart, like kind of at first you think he might be inventing something, but obviously, yes, it's Hitchcock movie, so it turns out to be real. But I think this to me bubbles up to one of Hitchcock's like philosophies on film, that film can never give you reality. Reality is reality. It's going to be filtered through a lens of an artist anyway, so you might as well make it interesting. The quote that he had was, films aren't a slice of life, they're a slice of cake, right? Life, they can't give you life, so you got to give us something interesting instead. So I kind of view this movie as all those other stories. Yeah, they're cool. And like Jimmy Stewart's looking at him, but he needs to, with his own imagination, heighten the reality of these everyday lives that are going on in this apartment building by inserting this drama of the murder. And then obviously it has to be real because it's actually a movie and we're the audience being entertained. But I see this as something that could be a reflection of Hitchcock's thesis, just because it's so obviously a comment on audience members watching things and directors, and he's
Mm-hmm.
directing like Grace Kelly at one point from the phone, like, go over here, look at this, look over there,
Mm-hmm.
much like a director sitting in a chair. So I see this movie as Hitchcock kind of putting his own viewpoints on movie making and what his style is, at least. I mean, it's not like every movie has to be this. So I personally like movies that are more interesting than the mundane stuff. But Hitchcock definitely didn't believe in the mundane is interesting enough to warrant like a movie. So that every time I see this movie, I just think not only about the fire that I should have called. called in, but about sort of like Hitchcock's thesis on filmmaking and or his films, I should say, is definitely
Right.
that.
I think it's true. At the same time, I think he paints a pretty rich sort of tapestry, I think, because if it were just about the murder and the drama of it, I don't think it'll hang or land on us or on Jimmy Stewart in that way. It lands because it is juxtaposed with the ordinary lives and the day to day of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're so invested. And even though nothing is happening in those other windows, you do want to see, and at some point you are scared for the woman who doesn't get a date, and you are sad for
Yeah.
her when she's sitting on her own. Or
Mm-hmm.
so all to me, it's a different take. Like all those stories matter actually, and there's enough in there where at least I'm curious about the musician guy. Like, what is his life? Like, I would totally watch a movie about all of those people.
The Rear
But
Window
then,
extended universe. That's what you want to see.
exactly. Oh,
Actually, I'm sure someone's pitched that. That's not a bad idea, honestly. We should get
yeah,
Universal on the phone.
probably. But I think it works because all that is interesting, and then you throw something else in there, and it doesn't even have to be a murder. It could have been something else. I'm sure they were playing with all sorts of stories with all of those other people. So to me, that's what I take, that it's a rich tapestry. And you see that in all of Hitchcock's movies, that there is maybe a MacGuffin or like a central conceit or what have you, but it's a rich textured kind of put together thing. Otherwise he wouldn't care about the mise-en-scène. It'll just be about the shock. He does care about all the other elements that come together.
Yeah, it's another case like in North by Northwest of the ordinary in the extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like the rest of that entire apartment building is just nothing, nothing, it's just all ordinary lives, but there's that one thing that is different, which is a murder's taking place, and that's extraordinary. And same thing with Jimmy
Yeah.
Stewart's like just bored and nothing's going on in his life, but there's that one extra thing that, again, you think maybe he's inventing it, but obviously he isn't. And I've seen this movie a couple times in the theater for my class, and then also just when it plays sometimes here in LA. And it still works so well with the
Oh
audience.
yeah.
Whereas every time during the scene when the bad guy Jimmy Stewart's looking through his binoculars, I think, or his camera, I can't remember which one it is, and the bad guy finally like realizes he's being watched and looks up and looks directly at him, like directly at the camera. Like every time in that plays in a theater, like people gasp because
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like he sees him. And like it's still, this movie still just works so well on that level in terms of getting that suspense feeling out of the audience, because you know that Jimmy Stewart's looking, and you know
Right.
that this guy is now dangerous. But now what's going to happen? So there's that tension there of like, is he going to get Grace Kelly? She's in the room. Jimmy Stewart can't go and help her. So he's setting up all those elements, and that's the suspense piece that is just, he's a master of suspense. I know that's what he's known for, but
Yeah.
it's like you can't help but just appreciate how well he constructs that and sets that stuff up. And just to see it still work on modern audiences today, that even every time I see this movie, I'm just like, oh my God, he's looking, just the
Yeah.
way that when he looks over, you're like, oh crap, now what's going to happen? Even though I know what's going to happen because I've seen the movie
Right.
like a dozen times, but just still so excellent.
Yeah, you still gasp. But I think, like we've been saying, like, but there's depth there too, because the more you watch the movie over and over, you
Mm-hmm.
start to then think about what is where the murder happens. Like, what is this relationship? What is this marriage? And then you start to piece back things, because she's always in the bed and maybe she's not happy, or maybe she's being annoying. Not that she should be killed for it, but
Right,
there's
right.
more there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never spelled out fully. There's enough for you to care. Otherwise, again, if this were just about the extraordinary shock value, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't come back to it. And that's
Right.
why this movie is a masterpiece, because
Mm-hmm.
it is juxtaposed with layers and depth, and then yeah, it's what's happening on the screen, but also in the living room.
Right. Right.
And at some point the tables turn because the people from the screen come into the living room,
Right.
and that's another layer. When he comes over, the bad
Oh
guy,
yeah. Yeah.
you're terrified. Absolutely. What's going to happen? Have they gone too far in their
Mm-hmm.
quest of curiosity and eavesdropping? Or are they really trying to help? Who
Mm-hmm.
knows?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And also something that this relates to North by Northwest as well, and actually Hitchcock is good at this too, is just when the movie's done, it's done. They don't need to drag anything out. Like
No.
once you realize he's the murderer, he goes over, he attacks Jimmy Stewart, and then just like the movie's just over. It's like, okay, the plot's done. Like, we don't need to continue to drag this out. And in North by Northwest too, we don't even really get to see how everyone gets captured. The movie just kind of ends. And again, I like that. He's like, look, at this point, it just I'm giving you boring stuff that there's no suspense there. It just
Right.
I don't need to wrap it up. It's done. Boom,
Yeah.
over. And I also just love the end of this movie too, when, you talk about character development and Grace Kelly, she's isn't exciting enough for Jimmy Stewart. So
Yeah.
at the end, she goes over there and joins in the adventure. So maybe you think their relationship's gonna be better. And she's reading that adventure catalog, and then she's like, you know what? No, I'm just gonna go back and read the fashion catalog. Like,
Right. I love
even though I think
that.
she's even wearing like some sort of, she's not in the dress, I don't think anymore at the end. Maybe the cover of the magazine, the first one has like woman in like adventure boots or whatever. Like, oh, okay, maybe now they're gonna be fine. And then she's like, nah, you're not gonna change me, Jimmy Stewart. Like, I still want to just be and look at the glamour mag. I love that how it ends on her. To your
Yeah.
point, like it is kind of like her in a way more her movie. Like, and her character has a lot more to do because Jimmy Stewart learns nothing at all. Like, he's still just a curmudgeon fool who, doesn't
Right.
really know what he has, and now he has both legs broken. Great. Like,
Oh yeah, that
he
too.
doesn't learn anything at
Yeah.
all. He makes the same mistake again. He gets injured and he's stuck in a chair. But she's at least had some excitement in her life, so
But
it's great.
maybe no change, right? And that's also a commentary. Like, we don't really change.
Right.
If we do, it's very incremental over a long period of time.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean we can't step out and have, an adventure or an exciting. And maybe it does seep into us in some form, but also not really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think she shouldn't be with him. Come on. Like,
No.
she's so much better for him. It's like it's crazy, but
Yeah. Yeah.
what a great film. I'm glad we got to
So
talk
good.
about this. It's a great one. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.